when a vast Chinese armada of more than 300 ships appeared outside the Galapagos Marine Reserve in South America earlier this year, Ecuador's government had reason to be suspicious. In 2017, a Chinese ship was boarded inside the Galapagos Marine Park by Ecuadorian authorities. Inside, they found this gruesome haul, over 6,000 shark carcasses illegally caught. The crew was jailed and the owners fined. Although this year the fleet appeared to remain outside the marine park, the sheer size of it sparked concern.
We did not detect any EEZ incursions from any of the vessels or any gear incursions as well. But the issue is that fish don't know borders.
There's not anything that is seemingly illegal either by China's national laws or by international laws, but whether or not that fishing effort is unsustainable, I mean, that's a completely different story.
According to UN maritime law, fishing vessels like these are required to use a transponder at all times to transmit their location.
Some of them are turning off their transponders and going dark for short periods, but what they're doing in those periods is unknown.
China is a fisheries superpower. With the world's largest fishing fleet, the mainland now consumes around 38% of total global fish production and hauls in 15.2 million tonnes of marine life a year, or 20% of the world's entire annual catch. The Chinese government says its distant water fishing fleet numbers around 2,500 vessels, but other estimates put it as high as 17,000. In comparison, the US has around 300.
China, more than any other fishing fleet in the world, travels further, stays at sea longer, pulls up more fish than any other fleet. Around the world, Chinese vessels are routinely and aggressively entering national waters.
In West Africa, Chinese companies are opening a new front of marine exploitation.
Illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing is of particular concern to West Africa because the countries that line the continent have economic challenges in monitoring, control, and surveillance.
In Ghana, foreign vessels are banned from buying fishing licenses. But more than 100 Chinese trawlers are operating in Ghanaian waters, using shell companies to disguise their real ownership.
They are Chinese vessels. If they are Ghanaian vessels, why don't we have Ghanaian names on it? Ghanaian, no. It's all Chinese.
The trawlers also operate very close to shore, and that puts industrial fishing vessels in direct conflict with local, artisanal, small-scale fishermen who depend on the fisheries for their livelihoods.
We've seen that vessels that fish illegally very often also engage in human rights abuses. In West Africa, Chinese-owned vessels usually have Chinese captains and potentially other Chinese senior crew, but very often they're using local crew from the countries where they're fishing. In Ghana, we recently interviewed fishermen and fishing observers. They told us about incredibly long working hours, up to 24 hours at a time, a lack of contracts and underpayment, and most worryingly, physical abuse. All of those that we interviewed had witnessed physical abuse on the vessels that they were working on.
Chinese boats are notoriously pretty boats with pretty brutal conditions, and they rely hugely on African, Indonesian, Filipino labor. And there have been dozens of reports of pretty serious abuses of those workers on those vessels.
China's fleets are also accused of displacing North Korean fishermen. A new study released earlier this year showed a massive amount of commercial fishing by Chinese vessels inside North Korean waters. That's in direct violation of UN sanctions that prohibit the sale of North Korean fishing licenses to overseas buyers.
This massive amount of fishing effort was so big that it was effectively displacing all the small-scale North Korean artisanal fishers who couldn't compete.
China is using huge lighting vessels to attract squid, some with globes as powerful as those used in stadiums. They're also using a technique known as pair trawling.
The two vessels will steam along a couple hundred meters apart with a large net between them, just basically catching every single thing in between.
This could explain in part why North Korean ships wash up on the west coast of Japan, as sailors are forced to go further to find fish.
This basically provides millions of dollars of revenue in hard currency to the North Korean regime. And the Chinese government, I am guessing, is just basically turning a blind eye to it.
China insists it is working to ensure its fishing fleets are acting sustainably and legally. It announced a partial moratorium on squid fishing in South America, and Beijing's 2020 white paper on fishing says it will, in its next 5-year plan, commit to severely crack down on IUU fishing activities, strictly regulate fishery behaviour, and promote the high-quality development of offshore fisheries. But experts are sceptical.
It is promising that China has created its own blacklist of vessels, that China is pulling back subsidies from fishing companies whose vessels have been involved in illegal fishing. However, there's been a trend in the West for law enforcement agents to treat illegal fishing like fisheries crime. And in China, unfortunately, illegal fishing is still seen as just an administrative matter.
China is also accused of using its fishing fleets to assert its sovereignty around the world. Another reason a new Chinese-funded fishing development in Papua New Guinea has raised eyebrows in Australia.
The Chinese, in many cases, are using their fishing fleet to assert presence in the South China Sea to bolster those sovereignty claims that China is making. And in some cases, it seems as though some of these fishing vessels aren't even fishing. And so they're likely to be maritime militia vessels, which are getting paid to just assert some kind of presence in the area and not necessarily needing to fish.
Without proper oversight and with many fisheries around the world in decline, China's massive fishing fleets will continue to venture further and deeper in search of their next catch.